Hey, and welcome to the Izzy Chinche Show.
You get nervous or you have some anxiety. When did that ever become a bad thing? If you're letting it rule your life, then yeah. But dude, I had anxiety in my body before I was gonna come on here and do this podcast because I was like, man, it's a very vulnerable thing to talk about.
I am so pumped that you tuned in. My goal with the show is to inspire and motivate you to the best of my abilities. I believe our world needs more leaders, and I believe that you, my listener, are a leader, and that you have the opportunity to impact your community and family by simply being you. I truly am here to try and serve and offer value to your life. And if you enjoy the show, it would mean the most to me if you could please either rate, subscribe, or share the show with anyone who you think might benefit from listening. Together, we can make this world a better place. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you love today's episode. Welcome. I am excited to be here today. I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be diving really deep and just trying to be as real, as open, and as vulnerable as possible, which is what I'm always trying to do. But this is coming from a personal standpoint. So I'm really going to try and just be real, not care about getting this right or wrong, but just tell my story. I'm also standing up today because I feel like this is something that I'm actually going to be speaking and talking about on a stage. So I want to practice talking about this story while standing. I will say this is going to be a little bit of a deeper one today. I'm going to be talking about bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, and depression, which are all three things that I have been diagnosed with in the past. And I just feel like I am supposed to talk about this, and I'm a little bit nervous today, but I'm just trying to set an example and be like, when those nerves come up, lean in, be open, be vulnerable, and ultimately just express my experience, because I truly believe I am most qualified to help the person that I used to be. And I think we live in a space where we get diagnosed with all kinds of things all the time, and pills are thrown at us, and it's sad. And that's why I want to talk about my story. So the first time I ever faced depression and got medicated was when I was 17 years old. I was having a lot of thoughts of wanting to kill myself, wanting to die, feeling very, very heavily just bogged down. I just truly felt depressed. And so I went into a therapist, and they quickly prescribed medication. Which is funny to me now because I look back now and I'm like, this is no surprise that I was feeling kind of depressed. My parents were divorcing. My best friend / brother, Jack, had just left to the Marines. And my older sister had also moved away. So I felt like my whole family was falling apart. And I then moved away to go play soccer. So I was feeling away and separated. So when I look back now, I'm like, kind of makes sense. You were feeling a little depressed, Izzy. Not that that's a good thing. But unfortunately, I just didn't know how to face any of the things that I was going through. I didn't know how to face my parents' divorce. I didn't know how to face, childhood traumas and things. And probably if I would have dealt with a lot of it right then, it would have helped me in all the things that I am going to be sharing with you. But I got put on medication. I felt really weird about it, didn't enjoy it. I only did it for 2 weeks, so I didn't really even have an actual bout of medication. It takes a long time for medication to actually sink in and run its course, and you have to take it the same time every day, and it takes a while for it to actually kick in. I got off of it, kind of got over that hump, no longer felt depressed, and just was living my life. By the time I hit 19 years old, I started to take a turn, though. I started to not be doing very well at all. I was having big depressive episodes, feelings of, wanting to die. I got paranoid. I went through phases of getting paranoid, actually believing I was going to die. I truly believed sometimes I was going to die. I would write my family goodbye letters and then like go out for my day. And I would literally write them goodbye letters because I actually believed that day I was going to die. So I wanted to like tell them I love them and all these things. So I truly was in this state of like paranoia, like seriously thought I was going to die. And stuff was coming up and I would start crying hysterically. I started talking in the mirror. I was like, oh my gosh, who am I talking to? Now I talk in the mirror all the time and I just don't judge it. And I'm like, yeah, I'm having a conversation with Izzy. But I started to get paranoid and wasn't doing well. And I was scared and thought all the ways that I was feeling was wrong and bad. And so I started to look for answers, and because I was like, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel like I'm going insane? Why do I feel like I'm a crazy person? Like I have a super high and a really low, and I'm happy, and then I'm so sad, and I'm happy, and I just felt like I'm on a roller coaster. I was also dealing with these like crying, screaming bouts where I just like wake up in the middle of the night, be like screaming, crying. And I wanted answers. I wanted to know what the deal was. So then COVID hit. So my whole life stopped, right? Everyone's whole life stopped. And I moved back home and I went to go see a therapist. And in that time, I saw the therapist 2 times, and then they sent me to the psychiatrist, who after 2 meetings diagnosed me with bipolar disorder and said, you have bipolar disorder. We're going to get you on medications. We're going to get you fixed up. We're going to get you sorted out. It's going to help you. In that moment, it felt like relief for me because I was like, okay, there's a reason I'm feeling so crazy. There's a reason I'm feeling so out of control. I have bipolar disorder. And the thing that happens to all humans is no matter what, we want to confirm our beliefs. We confirm whatever it is that we believe. And when the therapist and psychiatrist told me, you have bipolar disorder, I then consciously and subconsciously did whatever I needed to do to confirm that that was a truth, that it was true that I had bipolar disorder. And looking back now, I'm like, I needed a full life audit. I was sleeping at like 3 different places because I moved back from COVID. My parents' houses were packed. So I had an unstable living environment. I was drinking too much. I was not sleeping well because I was, in all random places, didn't have a consistent sleeping schedule. I didn't know what was going on with my life because obviously COVID and soccer and all these things. So I was in this massive state of chaos. I'm like, of course I was not doing well and I was unstable. So then I went on this journey of being diagnosed bipolar. And then I was on these highs and these lows, and I would come in and talk to my therapist like, oh, I had a really great couple of weeks and now I'm tanked. Right now I feel terrible. And then now I feel good and now I feel terrible. And every time I went in to speak to these therapists or speak to psychiatrists, the way that I was feeling, or if it was on the phone, whatever it is, the way that I was feeling was described as wrong or bad, and that it was going to be fixed and that it needed to be fixed. So then I always constantly thought that when I had a big high, that was bad, just as when I had a big low, that was also bad. And so I started to get it in my head that the way that I was feeling was wrong and bad. And how many of us are in that space where we think it's wrong or bad to feel sad or depressed when sometimes it just is? And so I got in this pattern of feeling like it was bad to feel the way that I was feeling. And I started to like have this internal chaos because I also didn't feel good about taking medication. And what happens to most people, especially if you're a confident individual or not, actually, taking medication starts to take a toll on your self-esteem because it doesn't feel like you are in control anymore, like you can self-regulate. It's the medication, and you are now dependent on a medication. You can't rely on you anymore. You're relying on a medication. And that's why we have a system that's heavily, heavily medicated. I'll also say, I believe that those therapists and those psychiatrists wanted what's best for me. I do not think they were bad people. I don't think they were out to get me, anything like that. I think that we just live in a society where medication is heavily, heavily pushed, and they're taught to push it, and they're taught to encourage people to take it and look at it as if that's the one all be all fix. So as time went on and I started having these highs and these lows, not once did we do a full life audit. Not once we go, Izzy, let's track what you're eating this entire week. Let's track your entire sleeping. No, let's just up your medication. You're not doing well. Let's just up your medication. I was 21 years old. I was drinking way too much. I wasn't sleeping well again. I had bad sleeping patterns. I was, kind of all over the place with that. And then I started to get paranoid about the medicine that I was taking. So then I got thrown off even more because I would take the medication and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't take it. So then I'm so unbalanced because I'm taking it and I'm not taking it consistently. And so they kept upping my medicine to the point I was supposed to take medication 3 times a day. It's crazy to me. This is the first time I'm ever talking about this publicly. It's interesting. I'm like, I was taking this medication 3 times a day. And I started to get so paranoid about taking it. And about 2 years ago, my fiance Mitchell sent me this brain work for me podcast, sent me this podcast by Andrew Huberman on what bipolar disorder actually is. And by this time I'd started to get a little bit more together. I felt like my life, I was a little more organized. I was drinking a little less, hopefully then. Sleeping more, had a better consistent schedule. And so I listened to this podcast by Andrew Huberman, and he starts to actually define what bipolar disorder is in this podcast. And I remember, I'll never forget listening to this podcast. I'm listening to podcasts and I get chills in my whole body because he's describing the scientific definition of bipolar disorder, and the root of what it truly is it's a sleeping disorder. It's a sleeping disorder. I didn't know that. I don't think most people know that bipolar disorder is a sleeping disorder. So I thought oh yeah, some nights I only sleep 3 to 4 hours. I feel like I can go a million miles. No, if you actually have this, it's you won't sleep for days. You will not go to bed. That's never been me. I've never been able to make a whole day without sleeping. That's just, I can't do that. I can't do that. And so I'm sitting there and I'm listening. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have bipolar disorder. I've been on this medication for 2 years. I've been told that I have bipolar disorder, so I'm trying to do the things. And I was like, I don't have this. I know I don't have this. I've known all along I don't have this. And so what do? I go back to a new therapist because I'm in Tennessee. I go into the therapist and we start talking. Then the conversation gets flipped very quickly. It's okay, so you don't have bipolar disorder. You still have some things going on that are bad and wrong that we need to fix. I'm thinking you have a borderline personality disorder. So we have this this evaluation, go through this whole process. I then get sent to the psychiatrist, the brain specialist. And within one meeting with them, they go, yeah, you have borderline personality disorder. And I remember sitting there with them in that moment. And it just it clicked for me. I was like, you are just trying to diagnose me with something to give me medication. Not because you want to sabotage me or anything, but you were taught that is the best way to handle it. And you believe this is the best thing. And I was like, this is not. And I sat there and I was like, what? There's no way. And they said, okay, so here's your next appointment. You're coming in. We're going to get you a prescription for medication. I said, okay, cool. I left and I never came back. I never came back. And I started to make this shift because I actually felt this surge of self-confidence come back. I actually started to feel sure again. And so I got off my medication, but I did it right. I didn't just cold turkey it like I would do sometimes. I slowly got off my medication and I slowly started to earn trust with myself again. I started to trust myself again and started to realize that my human experience, my human feelings of sometimes feeling depressed or feeling really high highs or really low lows are not wrong, good, bad. They just are.
And it's part of my human experience, and it's part of my makeup, and it's how I was made and created, and it's how I'm supposed to show up in this world. And so as time went on, I said, all right, well, let me think and let me do the self-audit. And I did the self-audit. And the number one thing for me that I have to get in order to be able to function well is to make sure I'm getting just a good sleep pattern, just consistent sleep, a very similar bedtime and a very similar wake up time. For me, like if I have that in order, I'm pretty much like, okay, I might have the high, the low. I'm not saying I don't deal with that anymore, but I kind of just need those things in a row. And not once in the 3 years that I was diagnosed and put on medication and all these things, not once during that time did we do a whole sleep audit. And sure, when you go in, they'll ask you like, oh, how are you sleeping? What's it like? And yeah, they'll maybe encourage, but I'm like, why are we not reinforcing all these things? Sleep, diet, alcohol consumption before we're pushing medication. And it's just because the system that we live in, and we live in a society now where human experiences and human emotions are dubbed as wrong and bad. And let me tell you, nothing is wrong or bad with the way you feel. You are just having a human experience. And even more so, you can change your patterns of the way that you feel. I used to have these feelings of anxiety come on, and I would feed into them and be like, yeah, my gosh, I'm like, my body is consumed with anxiety. And then I go into a depressive episode and a low. And now I'm able to talk and use this and say, I can listen to this body, and I am so grateful for this body. But this is in control of my body. My body does not rule my mind. But my body was ruling my mind. However I was feeling, I made reality in my mind, didn't take control, and then said, it's also bad and wrong. It's also bad and wrong. And then you start creating this distrust between your brain and your body. And you're out of alignment. And I say we are because I see people do this. And I just want to be the one to tell you, just because you have anxiety doesn't mean that you're someone with anxiety. That isn't your whole identity. You have moments of feeling anxiety, but you are still you, and you're an amazing person, and that is not all encompassing, and you can experience those feelings of anxiety, and nothing is wrong with that. Same as feeling depressed, and I have been there. I felt so low. And truly, it is not wrong or bad, and you can change it. Sometimes you just have to feel that, let your body do what it needs to do, and then say, okay, but the mind is in control. My mind is in control, and I have say in this. I have say in this. Right? Like we dub everything. We put everything in these boxes. People are like, oh, you're such a perfectionist. I'm like, no, you just like things done right. You just like things done right. It doesn't have to be bad that you want things done correctly, right? Or or that you get nervous or you have some anxiety. When did that ever become a bad thing? If you're letting it rule your life, then yeah. But dude, like I had anxiety in my body before I was going to come on here and do this podcast, because I was like, man, it's a very vulnerable thing to talk about. But I didn't let that rule me. I didn't let that own me. That wasn't the end all be all truth. That was just a feeling. And we have to start shifting away from our human experiences being bad or wrong or whatever else. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And I'm not saying that there aren't certain things that need to be medicated, but man, I wish I never went on medication. I wish I never went on medication, because I think it took away from me, who I actually am, and my actual experiences. Right? I know for some people this is going to be triggering. They're like, I need my medication. Yeah, I was one of those. I was like, no, you don't get it. You don't understand. You wouldn't know. I'm like, man,
If I could go back now, and what I would tell myself is like, dude, you just got to start trusting yourself again. You got to start doing the things to trust yourself again. And then you're going to realize, dude, I really don't need that medication because I can regulate myself. I can work it out. I know this body might have some flare-ups. We might be feeling some type of way. It might be bad. It might be ugly, but I can handle it. I trust that I can. And it's just a huge shift. And it was life-changing for me. And I'm so grateful I had that shift, because otherwise I would be on medication for like four years now. No, thank you. I am me. You are you. You don't need medication to mess up who you are. And I'm not saying that there aren't certain things that need to be medicated, but sometimes it's not bad the way you're feeling, and you need to confront those deep wounds and then move forward and move forward in a healed state and be free. I'm so much more free than I ever have been in my life. It's not that I don't ever have lows and highs. Like, I got those all the time. I just don't see them as good. I just don't see them as bad anymore. They just are. And I deal with them. I don't take a pill that lowers my self-esteem. I don't do that. So I'd encourage you, if you do have something, to start doing a self-audit and like really looking at the details of your life as to why you're feeling that way, and then what you can do to change that. And being on medication your whole life, it's a sad way to live. And I'm not like, some people have to, but maybe you don't have to. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe you're not broken. I remember feeling like I was broken. I felt like something was wrong with me. Like, if I didn't have my medication, I was not going to be able to live a good life. And that wasn't true. That wasn't true. And maybe that's the same for you. So I hope that this landed with someone today, even if only three people listen to this podcast. If you did listen to this whole thing, I really appreciate it. Thank you. I love you. And start trusting yourself again. Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, I would greatly appreciate if you could share this episode with 5 people you think could benefit from the show. Also, please feel free to connect with me on Instagram at IzzyChinche or my website at izzychinche.com. Thank you so much for being you. Keep being a leader and making this world a better place.